this is a Friday straight to vault video, and I didn't know the topic up until about an hour and a half ago because my phone rang an hour and a half ago, and the Christmas lawyer called me and said, "Hey, Steve, I'm watching a video of you on YouTube talking about me." So I called him right back, and I said, "Tell me what you know." And I had a long conversation with him, and very, very nice guy. I did not say his name in the video. I often don't say names in videos because quite often, does it really matter if someone's name is Bob or Joe or John? And really, But the man's name is Jeremy Morris. He's an attorney, and he's the one who was the guy who, with his family, put up a display on his front lawn of Christmas. And it made the news because the HOA told him he had to take it down, and he thought that was inappropriate. And there's more to the story, which I'll get to in a second. But it wound up being a federal court lawsuit. A jury came back in his favor. The judge reversed that, and that's now up on appeal in the Ninth Circuit, and it's been there for a couple of years. And so he said, "Steve, first of all, I'm watching the video. Never seen a video of yours before. Don't know anything about you." But he goes, "You seem like a nice guy." And he goes, "I want to answer some questions you have." And I said, "First question," and I stopped and I go, "First question, was it a real camel?" Because in the story, it said that part of his display involved a camel. And the question was it a real live camel, or is it like an inflatable camel or a three-dimensional holographic camel? He goes, "No, it was a real camel. That was an actual camel." I said, "Okay." And he said, "But I do want to get a couple points across to you that were not that clear in the stories that are written on the news." He goes, "There, of course, is a documentary on Apple. And then there's also been different news reports that have done videos." And he goes, "And they have varying degrees of accuracy because the story is so complicated that quite often they skip over some stuff to get to other stuff. And there's a lot here, which explains why the phone call with him was an hour and a half long." And so, for instance, he said, and this is something that I think would have really put the story in a different contrast, is that he did the display for 5 days. 5 days. Not 6, not 10, not the entire month of December, not like the day after Halloween, like they start playing Christmas music on the radio. 5 days. And for the 5 days, each year that he ran the display ran for 2 hours. 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Didn't start till 6, didn't run past 8. 2 hours. So he says, technically speaking, 5 times 2, if our math is correct, is 10 hours. So the entire extravaganza on his front lawn lasted 10 hours per year. He said he had a neighbor next door who actually didn't mind the display, and in fact told him that she moved away not because of his display, but because of the way the HOA was treating him. She thought was inappropriate. But that's another story altogether. So a few little things that he told me about along the way, which I do find very interesting. Number one, he is an attorney. I mentioned that he's having issues right now with the State Bar of Idaho because they're coming after him about statements he made regarding the judge. And he and I talked about that for quite some length, although I'm not really sure that really changes much about what's publicly out there. He made statements about the judge, and the Idaho State Bar claims that someone complained to them and said, "Hey, there's an attorney disparaging a sitting judge." And the question is he allowed to do that with his First Amendment rights versus the rules of the State Bar of Idaho? So right now, he's still licensed in Idaho, but he said that he has moved to another state, and that was in the story. He's moved to another state. He hasn't disclosed yet which state that is. He is looking to get admitted in another state, but he's concerned because he's got this looming, lingering issue with the State Bar of Idaho, which may or may not come back to haunt him. Now, a couple of things that are pretty interesting here is that there was a line in the article that I skipped because I didn't understand it. And it mentioned something about the trial and Santa Claus testifying. And I wasn't sure if they were referring to his trial or a trial from some television, a trial from some old movie about, is there really a Santa Claus? And he said, "Oh no, there was actually a Santa Claus who testified at my trial." He said there's a gentleman named Robert who plays Santa Claus, looks like Santa Claus, and was involved in the display on the Morris front lawn. And so they called him in to testify, and they asked him, when you come in to testify, Don't dress like Santa Claus, please. But if you want to, you could wear all red, for instance. So apparently when he came in the courtroom, a lot of people looked at him and said, hey, that guy looks like Santa Claus. And so when he was asked, what's your name? He did say, well, some people call me Santa Claus, but my name is, and he said his name, Robert, and I don't know his last name, which is a pretty amusing story. So there actually was a Santa Claus testifying in the trial. And the crazy part about the story is, and I talked about this in the video, is that a jury returned a verdict in his favor, in the favor of the Christmas lawyer. And after that, the judge took it upon himself to reverse the jury findings, throw out the verdict in favor of him, and instead insert a judgment in favor of the HOA. And now, the weird part about that is that that's a real high burden if you want to make that stand up on appeal. And so it's now in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. But the problem is that they've now had this case for a few years, and there's no indication that an opinion might be coming anytime soon. And so it's unclear what the snag is, but you can't push the courts to move any faster because they move at their own glacial pace. It'd be like attempting to go push a glacier. In fact, you'd probably have better luck pushing a glacier than trying to get a court to move. So that is where they are at with respect to the procedures in the courts. But I have to mention that one of the concerns I had was I heard about something about traffic. And I thought, well, if there's this huge display on some guy's lawn and all kinds of people are coming to see it, won't that cause some kind of traffic congestion? And he told me that what he did was he never gave out the address of his house. He said, if you want to see this display between 6 and 8 on the 5 days it's there, you go to this park and get on a shuttle, and the shuttle will bring you over. So there will be a shuttle running back and forth. There may have been more than one shuttle, but I don't know if there's ever been more than one shuttle in front of the house. But he said that was the extent of the traffic, was the shuttle service to get people over there. But he said, among other things, they'd bring over people from old folks' homes, some of whom didn't get out very often and wanted to come see this. And so they'd have them in the shuttle, and they'd pull the shuttle up. And he said that a lot of times there were people who couldn't get off the shuttle to get out and enjoy the display in person. So instead, they would, if they were singing Christmas carols, perhaps turn and sing to the bus or the shuttle. So I think that's pretty cool. But one of the things that he said that he felt unfortunate about how it got left out of things is that he wanted to move into this neighborhood. They found the house, and they were thinking about being able to put up a Christmas display. And he said that he had actually talked to the people in the HOA at the very beginning and said, I want to put up a Christmas display, a rather elaborate Christmas display. And he said that we're not going to let you do that. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. And so he put up the display because the rules of the HOA didn't appear, at least in their face, to forbid such a thing. And he said that although he's an attorney, he had other attorneys read the HOA rules, and they said, I don't see why you couldn't put up the display like you're planning on putting it up. So he put the display up, and then they started making noise about you can't do that, take it down, threatening, all kinds of stuff. And at some point, he sat down and talked to them and said, look, I don't think the rules as written forbid me from doing this, unless you can show me how I'm wrong, other than just saying you're wrong. And he said, and so obviously, if you guys think I'm breaking the rules, presumably they could sue him or fine him or something. And if he thinks that they're being wrong in their treatment of him, he can sue them. But at one point he said, I'm willing to strike an agreement with you where we will settle this, and I'm not asking you for anything. I just simply want you guys back away, I'll back away, and that's it. And he wants to put the display up, but the issue now is he put the display up, they were harassing him, he filed the lawsuit because he kind of felt he had to because the statute of limitations was about to run. They countersued him, claiming that he violated their rules, and they've gone to court, and both sides have run up hellacious legal fees. He's paid a fortune on this. And the HOA has paid a fortune on this. And there aren't going to be any winners in this case. I don't care how it works out because it's going back and forth. This whole thing goes back now 5 or 6 years or more. And I suppose if the case gets spun around on appeal and gets reinstated in his favor, yeah, he'll win. But the time he spent doing this and the hassle it was for him and his family and his kids, they've now moved, they've left the state, he's worried about his law license, and that's assuming that he wins. And of course, if the HOA wins, then he's got to pay them. And then keep in mind that if he wins, the HOA doesn't print money like the government. They get money from their homeowners association members. And so there are going to be people in the HOA who are going to be told, oh, by the way, there's now a special assessment because we got to pay off this big judgment against us on behalf of that guy we should have left alone. And so I mentioned before, and I'll admit I did not ever see this guy's display live. That's the only real way that I think I could truly appreciate or understand it. But I said, I tend to like my neighborhoods quiet. And if some guy built this huge display right next door and I could see it, that might bother me. He pointed out, however, that the house he bought was on a corner and the house next door was positioned in such a way that they couldn't see it. So I said, okay, that does change things quite a bit. That does. But be that as it may, here we are all these years later, and it boils down to the guy had an elaborate, no questions asked, an elaborate Christmas display for 5 days a year, 2 hours a day, 10 hours total. Probably took him 10 times that, 15 times that to set it all up and to take it all down. And so I can tell you that he mentioned to me that he's been interviewed by pretty much every news outlet in Idaho, in America, and then also Canada, Germany, Australia. It turns out Christmas is celebrated worldwide. It's the weirdest thing. And a lot of people are intrigued by this story. And so I had a long conversation with the guy, Jeremy Morris. Very, very nice guy. The interesting thing about it is that I've spoken to a lot of attorneys about legal issues. And I've spoken to a lot of people I've done videos about. And interestingly, he, and I hope he doesn't take this the wrong way, did not come across to me like an attorney. He came across to me like an impassioned client. And of course, he's both in this situation, but he was not the attorney representing himself. He hired attorneys to do that for him. And then for a while, he was also represented by the First Liberty Institute, which is a legal entity that looks out for constitutional rights and so on. And so he was wise enough to know, yeah, you got to bring somebody else in, especially when you are as passionate about it as you are. It's very, very difficult to make very, very calculated, strategic moves when you're really fired up about a case. And so you've always got to try to maintain a little bit of distance between you, the attorney, and the case itself. But he came across like a very, very impassioned gentleman who, you know, has been tied up in this now for years. And I'm glad he called. This is a great conversation. And I'll be honest with you. In the last 5 years, I've probably spoken to 3 or 4 people who were the subject of videos I did. I've gotten a lot of emails from people. But I've only gotten a couple phone calls. And so when he said, hey, Steve, this is Jeremy Morris. I am the Christmas attorney. You did a video about me. I'd like to talk to you about it. I had 2 quick thoughts. One was, I wonder if he's mad. And 2, was it a real camel? Because that's the question I had. Was the camel real? Was the camel real? Turns out it was. So, Jeremy, thanks for calling. I hope that answers some questions that you may have had about that video after I ran it. He said that although he appreciates the documentary by Apple, he said one of the problems, of course, with a documentary like that is by necessity, they've got to leave some stuff out. They also do try to make things dramatic. And he said, so it's very difficult to get the full story from any one of these sources. He did say that there's a 9-minute video attached to the Fox News piece, which is the piece that I read from during my video. He said that 9-minute Fox News piece is actually very, very good in showing a very decently balanced version of the story, at least showing the viewpoint that he would like people to see about the question. So in case you're curious, he is in another state now, no longer Idaho. He's hoping to pass the bar there. I said, by the way, what kind of law do you practice? And he said, well, general practice. He goes, but I've discovered that I've been getting phone calls from people who need help dealing with HOAs. So I've known more attorneys who did something that they loved doing because they had to and because they found out they loved doing it. And then they realized, oh, I can do good in this field. And next thing you know, the fact that you dealt with your HOA gives you expertise in dealing with HOAs. And he's had some good success in those cases, including one, he says, you want to look it up, look up the North Carolina HOA cross case, and a case involving a cross that somebody put up in an HOA. They contacted him because they heard about his situation. He wound up helping them, and I believe that case came out very, very well for the people who wanted to put up the cross. So that's pretty cool. So I hope it does work out for him. But that's, again, the update on Jeremy Morris, the Christmas attorney who just called me, and he's a heck of a nice guy. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.